Imagine waking up one day and discovering that your sister is the true hero of the world, while you, the family fool, only received the title and the crown, basically the intern promoted by accident. Watching your family, your friends, and even the virtual dog from the village pass on to a better place, to the famous isekai, and you thinking, wait, wasn't there a plan B? Then imagine being thrown back to the past with the chance to fix everything, but with one detail, the evil eye watching you, like that nosy neighbor who never sleeps. This is the starting point of our journey, a broken hero, a sister who deserves more recognition than Batman, and a world about to repeat the apocalypse from scratch. How do you think this idiot of a failed hero will fare throughout the story? That's what we will discover together. Everyone else was dead. In the middle of the battlefield, only one person could speak. He was being helped by his sister, who asked him to pull himself together. Before them stood a monster that mocked this sight. Seeing weaklings fighting for their lives like this, while just watching, is like if this were a Hollywood movie, someone would have definitely called for a dramatic pause to sell popcorn. The wizard tells him to shut up by casting a fire spell, but the magic does nothing to the opponent, and the creature orders them to kneel. Thus, the monster's power hits them immediately. Both were knocked down instantly even when it should have been impossible. No matter how much power one has, it was unattainable. Defeating an evil god as a human was impossible. Seriously, it felt like an RPG fight where the player forgot to equip the right weapon. The brother tells Fiona that he would buy some time for her to escape, but Fiona refuses, picking up her sword from the ground. He turns around, surprised to see his sister stand up. The world would end if they didn't defeat him here. Without killing him, at least they could seal him with the rest of the divine powers of the sword. The brother screams in denial because doing that would compromise his soul. It was as unlikely as finding an empty Starbucks at 8 in the morning. But Fiona apologizes because she would leave her brother alone. However, even if that happens, she still wanted to protect this world. Her brother screams as Fiona prepares to use her power with the sword. A great explosion occurs, and the sword is successfully plunged into the monster. He lets out a powerful scream, and everything fades away as Fiona says goodbye. The tension was so high that even the Wi-Fi would have dropped out of nervousness. Thus, her brother could only watch as she and the monster disappeared. Following tradition, the hero who saved the world, Grey Shepherd, would be crowned as emperor. Grey became the emperor and the hero of heroes, with fame and money. Everyone reveres him, the supreme man who perfected the secrets of magic. He was the survivor of continental countries, destined to be the great emperor. It was the kind of plan so risky it would make even Batman say, "Hold on there, buddy." But Grey thinks it was all meaningless. His sister saved the world. He wanted to have protected her and the smiles of his companions. But he couldn't save any of them. This throne was built on top of bodies. Everyone was gone. Half the world was swept away. Fiona spent her life sealing a monster that would be revived within a millennium. The silence that remained was as uncomfortable as when someone likes a photo of yours from 2010 on Facebook. Grey was furious because this didn't mean his victory. There should have been some other way to do things. He would have the knowledge for his journey to save the world and the evil god he analyzed. He didn't care if necromancy was forbidden, as long as he could revive Fiona. Grey was ready to even use the power of the evil god. It was as impossible as driving in Los Angeles without hitting traffic. Just a little more was needed. He should be able to find it if it was with his eye. If it was with the eye of the evil god, then it should be possible. A man shouts at the emperor to calm down because a rumor is circulating the palace. Things like the emperor also being the wizard of the evil eye. That's when he saw a horrific scene in the necromancy magic circle. At that moment, even the Netflix documentary narrator would have been left speechless. It was Grey, aged, angry because the Prime Minister entered without permission. The Prime Minister freezes, asking what exactly this is. On the ground was a creature calling Grey brother, and thus the Prime Minister's life was swept away for nothing. The thing on the ground kept calling for Grey non-stop. It seemed easy on paper, but in practice it was like trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the manual. After testing several forbidden spells, after obtaining the eye of the evil god, he still failed. He was unable to restore Fiona's soul. Grey wonders what he was doing. Suddenly, a voice questions if he wanted to get her back. A hole appeared above him, and Grey wonders who was speaking. Even if he discarded his victory or lost his life, he could save the most precious person to him. If it were at a fast food place, that decision would be in the regret promotion section of the menu. If he wanted to sacrifice everything, he would show the way. Grey wonders if it was another evil creature. But it was fine for him. Grey went mad and agreed because he needed nothing else. He only wished for the happiness of the people he loved. And so the world was bathed in fire and destruction. The emperor vanished, and the last thing people saw was Grey laughing. The palace was engulfed in flames as everything was destroyed. When he awoke, he was under a tree full of apples. That nostalgic smell made him realize it was the witch's tree. If he remembered correctly, he would be cursed if he cut it down. For some reason, he was there without permission. He would definitely end up in the line of fire. If this were the NFL, the referee would have already called for a replay because something didn't add up. That place, when he saw it, was Carpe Diem. It was his hometown that he hadn't seen in so long. Many people were gathered, walking peacefully. For some reason, the town was still the same as he remembered. Even when it was swallowed in darkness with the demon invasion, it was the kind of mystery that would make even TikTok's algorithm ask for help on Reddit. Gray wonders if he has gone back in time, even though such magic shouldn't be possible. But this was a miracle to make it possible. It was then that Fiona appeared calling him when she was still just a child. Gray turned around startled as soon as he saw her approaching. Fiona happily shows that she got several loaves of bread from the bakery. The tension was thick enough to cut with a plastic spoon from a food court, because she said she wanted more since last time it was delicious, and she got a lot extra. He was wondering what they would have for dinner until now. They didn't have to worry about breakfast either with so much food. Gray ran out and hugged her, leaving Fiona confused. To Fiona's surprise, he was crying for some unknown reason to her. She asks what was wrong. Maybe they had mistreated him again. Gray shakes his head. He just missed her, that was all. He wanted to keep hugging her for a little longer. Fiona comments that he wasn't a child anymore, laughing because he missed her so much. She laughs because Gray was really funny. That had the subtlety of a traffic jam on the I-405 at 5 p.m. Gray returned to the past, recovering Fiona, the only family he had. He needed nothing else. As long as he could be with her, it was enough. But of course, things wouldn't be that simple. Gray still had the eye of the evil god with him, and he fell to his knees because he felt pain in it. It felt like it was on fire. Fiona became worried, and Gray replied he was fine. Something hurt his eye. He wonders why it had to be now, but a voice says it placed a curse on his eye. This curse would lead him to its domain. As the event that resulted in Fiona's death and the possibility of her dying again increased, Gray would be condemned, but this was a curse that would prevent being innocent now. The protagonist questions if it was really a curse. He was satisfied enough with that, even though the evil voice spoke like that. If the pain alerted him to the danger of Fiona, it wasn't a curse but a blessing. Gray thanked her, and the voice grumbled that it was fine if that were the case. The pain vanished with the presence. Gray was still surprised. It was frightening. He didn't know what or who it was. Everything was fine for now. This time, he would rewrite history and prevent Fiona's death without regrets. It was his greatest goal in this life, and to achieve such a feat. He had to prevent 12 tragedies from happening as a result of the demon invasion. In addition, he had to save 7 people who were his former companions. They would prepare for the great fight. This way, they could prevent the death of the population and Fiona. Gray would be able to achieve the perfect ending this way. Fiona woke her brother from his thoughts with a shout. She had been calling him for a while, but Gray completely ignored her. She promised to help bring water with the bread and gave it to Gray to go back first. Fiona said she would return later, but Gray was having trouble even carrying the heavy bag of bread. He wondered if they were stones because it was insane weight. But his sister carried it effortlessly. She had been strong since that time. Suddenly, a voice shouts, calling for Gray as he was heading home. They ask if he was leaving his sister and walking alone because he was nothing without her. For someone who doesn't even earn money, he still managed to get a lot of bread, and they don't like that. As expected, the guys were mistreating Gray and wanting to take his bread. But Gray turned around and hit the guy right away, shocking the other two. He simply threw the guy to the ground and knocked him out instantly. Now he could remember things clearly. They were the guys who bullied him for being weak and for being an orphan. Whenever they did this, Fiona was the one who came to his rescue. To his sister, Gray was the one who needed protection. The other two rushed to fight as well, but Gray was ready this time. He defended himself from one's punch and threw him to the ground as if it were nothing. The other one who stayed backed away scared, even begging for help. But Gray grabbed him right after. Just like in his past life, Fiona protected him. But this time, Gray would protect her. They didn't have to worry. Burning or freezing wouldn't leave any trace behind, so he would only leave a few bruises. After it was over, the protagonist simply sighed. Gray could draw magic circles with his vision. That was the power of the evil eye. It didn't take long for Fiona to appear, not understanding what was happening. He turned around with the most innocent face, saying that they started a fight and Gray just took care of them. She didn't need to worry because he had finished things. But suddenly Fiona ran away because Gray had fallen to the ground. His body suddenly collapsed and the protagonist fainted to Fiona's concern. When he woke up, he was confused about where he was because it didn't seem like the royal bed. It looked like his home in his hometown. It seemed like he had really gone back to the past. Fiona called him, relieved that Gray had really woken up. He sighed upon realizing that he had indeed fainted. She said that he fell suddenly and didn't open his eyes all day. Even the old healer didn't know what happened. The village chief said that Gray worried his sister and should be more careful. Gray apologized for making them all worry. Then he felt pain in his body again. His whole body was screaming in pain. Fiona rushed to help Gray not move too much. She was going to prepare a snack now. If he didn't rest enough, she would tie him up and force him to do so. Gray asked the chief what year it was, and he replied, worried if he hit his head to forget the date. As expected, the world was the past he knew. It was the time when Salvation heroes didn't exist yet. Carpedium was where Gray and Fiona lived. Even as orphans, they didn't know they would end up living like this. He only remembered that the chief found them and took them in the nearby forest of the village. The chief was a former army instructor and gave them a place to live, but taught magic and fencing. As time passed, the Salvation heroes were formed, and 5 years later, Fiona offered her own life in exchange for saving humanity. Gray had to protect her. He still had knowledge of his past life, but not the necessary strength. When the protagonist asked for training, the chief was surprised. Gray had no choice. To protect Fiona and prevent tragedies, it was necessary. The chief was left confused about what he was talking about, but he agreed, as long as Gray was so determined not to back down. Fiona returned asking what her brother was doing. Gray stood up to do the training, and she hurried to ask him to rest soon. But he had no time for that, even if she didn't understand what he was talking about. So Gray went out with the village chief to the outside of the house. He wasn't in condition now, and the chief would make him exercise lightly for now. But Gray refused. He didn't want the chief to have to hold back. The chief was caught off guard because he felt a huge fighting spirit coming from him suddenly. The protagonist then created a magic circle and launched an attack against the chief, who dodged in shock. The two began to fight, but the chief's attacks had no effect. He was left confused about what was happening with Gray. He had always been a guy with a strong affinity for magic. He always had a kind heart and hesitated to hurt others. But the Gray of now didn't have the hesitation the village chief knew. Those eyes belonged to someone who had taken hundreds of lives of enemies. Fiona even worried about her brother when she saw him fall coughing blood. The chief said that the balance between body and mana was distorted. He needed to strengthen himself first. The chief tells Fiona to take care of him as he would be preparing for training. And so the days of training with Fiona began, with Gray trying to keep up with her. Being trained by the person he wanted to protect was indeed strange. But it wasn't bad. He just had some peaceful time left beside his sister. His body was slowly getting stronger. He could see it using magic. Time passed, and Fiona commented that the day's training was fun too. Gray's body seemed to have developed well, probably thanks to Fiona. It was fun for Fiona to train as well. She always did everything alone, but with Gray, things changed. That's why they should continue practicing together from then on. Gray agreed, even though he was worried. On the way, Fiona noticed a crowd that seemed noisy. As they approached, Gray froze. He pointed to go the other way because it was crowded with people. After that man arrived in the village, that was when their tragedies began. If Fiona was chosen, it would only lead to the path of death. Gray knew he couldn't let Fiona meet that man. Their world was destined for destruction by the evil god, a calamity that awakens every millennium, manipulating the human race. Champions chart a journey of salvation. One of them was the chosen of the Holy Sword. These chosen ones, called heroes, were selected by a cleric from the Salvation Agency. In her past life, Fiona was a candidate for heroine, and Gray would prevent that this time. Fiona heard him suggest a trip to Nylon in 4 days round trip. Gray mentioned he got some tools from the blacksmith that needed to be delivered and wanted Fiona to do it for him. He intended to get her out of the village. Gray would stay to help the village chief, but Fiona noticed something seemed off with the protagonist. Recently, Gray always had a sad face. If something bothered him, he could talk to her. He replied that it wasn't just her, but he changed the subject, saying it was just the strange weather. Gray asked her not to worry about him, so Fiona packed her things and left. She was the only person Gray couldn't reveal the truth to. Meanwhile, that man was in the middle of the village with the gathered people. He was the selector of the champion chosen by the Salvation Agency and would judge candidates. Everyone was shocked because a guy like that came to the village. If no one volunteered, then the village would be deemed heretical for following the evil god. One of those who mistreated Gray said that defeating him might get him all the money in the world. People saw that he was the carpenter's second son. Maybe he could pass the test. There were no rules, but the selector doubted the guy could understand. Whoever neutralized the opponent wins. The guy got excited because he didn't have to hold back until he won. The selector said that the guy should surrender as soon as possible. Then he tried to punch the selector. He retaliated with such a brutal blow that sent the guy flying. He couldn't even handle an attack like that after everything. He shouted to get up and fight to save the world, to destroy the demon god. The people around saw the selector kill the guy in front of them, and so he shouted for the next person to step up and try their luck. He said the village was full of trash. There wasn't a potential candidate. He left shouting. looking for a blessed champion capable of saving the world. No one wanted to get involved in the fight and die. But the selector pointed to a guy with a good physique and suggested he take the test. The man was worried because he had children and would never be able to be a champion like that. But the selector called him anyway to save the world and leave his family behind. He was grabbed and dragged while the children begged to let their father go. The man kicked the children who were hindering the salvation of humanity. The man didn't think he would be capable of that. He had never hit a person in his whole life. If that were the case, the selector would make him learn how to use violence from now on. The two began to fight, and the selector shouted for the man to hit him. Otherwise, he would lose his life, and the man bent down in fear. That's when someone stopped the weapon before it hit him. It was Gray, who said he would take the test in his place. One person per village should be enough. In the previous world, Fiona was the one who saved this man. If he took her place, things would change. The selector saw that he used magic and had an advantage in close combat. He prepared to attack the protagonist, laughing at casting magic and seeing that nothing was left. While laughing, he didn't even notice that Gray was appearing behind him. The selector turned around, startled as soon as he saw the magic circle. Thus, he unleashes the magic, shocking the selector for using such a fire spell. Gray was not obliged to answer his questions. Instead, he prepared another attack. The man ran away, not understanding how an amateur could use 3 different spells. He was surprised. This was a champion that appears every millennium. He knew he found in Gray. He begs the champion, crying, to save humanity. Gray responds that in the future he would create, he was not necessary. And thus he ends the battle with a final magic shot against the man. A celebration was prepared to welcome the new champion. They could hardly believe that the orphan managed to become such a powerful champion. Gray responds that it was nothing special. There were several other champions around the world, but people still find him impressive. Perhaps he could save the world. If that happens, he would have the chance to change the slogan of his stores for advertising. Others argue for having cared more for Gray than the others. The guys who used to mistreat him even approach to talk. They all bow, begging for forgiveness for having spoken ill of him all this time. They didn't know he was this strong or that he would be the future champion. Gray responds that the injuries were nothing much, not compared to what he went through. The guys are happy with the biggest shamelessness for being forgiven. Gray tells them to stay away. Instead, he would prefer they commit to protecting Fiona. He didn't even know when he would need to leave the village, and they promised they would protect her with their lives. They realize they haven't seen Fiona for some time. Gray went after his sister, who was isolated, sitting far from everyone. As he approaches, he asks why she is there. She replies she doesn't know and moves away, to which Gray holds her, asking if she is angry. Fiona denies it, but only feels she no longer knows who her brother is. Suddenly, he makes the champion selection without consulting her and sends her away from the village. Gray hesitates to explain, which irritates Fiona because he was leaving her aside. He couldn't say what was going on in his head, even when they should be family and trust each other. Gray responds that he was always thinking of just one thing. That was her happiness. For that to happen, he would save the world. This was their last banquet. So he suggests they could say goodbye with a smile. Even feeling down, Fiona followed Gray back to the village. Later, Gray went to say goodbye to the village chief. He says that no matter what they say, this would always be his home. No matter what happens, he should come back home. Gray says he has something important to tell him, which surprises him for being so formal. In 3 years, the demonic army would attack the village, and people would die. The chief was shocked because Gray told him all this, but he would keep the alert imminent. The chief still knew that the protagonist would do his best as a champion. Gray responds that yes, he would do everything to save everyone. In the end, the protagonist did not see Fiona, and she did not come to say goodbye. He wanted to see her face one last time since he didn't know when he would see her again. He thought it was better this way. Fiona wouldn't have to get involved in the war. Gray wanted to avoid the worst possible ending because of that. Suddenly he heard a voice. It was Fiona who appeared ready for the journey. She would accompany him so they could go together. Fiona even showed that she received the selector's approval after finishing with him. It was her first time traveling, and she was excited. But Gray pushes her away, denying and telling her to go back right now. The journey was dangerous, but that's exactly why Fiona wouldn't leave him alone. They were family. They should always support each other. Gray freezes when he realizes she was recalling words from the past. He himself said they should always support each other. But Gray was shocked because Fiona said similar things in her past life. Fiona didn't want to be separated from her brother at all. If he died, there would be no one for her. Now Gray could understand. Fiona's feelings were still the same as in the past world. Fiona says that if Gray doesn't take her along, then she will go on a journey alone. Sighing, the protagonist agrees. It was safer to travel together rather than alone. She was happy about this, and thus they set off. The war between humans and demons would still worsen. It was safer to keep her by his side. Or so Gray thought as his eye began to activate, the danger alert that hadn't gone away. In the city of Cornu, Fiona ran happily because this was a huge city. She had never been in a place like this. There was so much delicious food to try. She points to people performing and calls her brother to watch. It was the best city in the world for Fiona, although Gray wasn't as excited. This city was actually the smallest, but all that mattered to Fiona was having fun. It was nostalgic for Gray. She reacted the same way in her past life. Stopping to think, Fiona wonders what the journey of salvation even was. The selector was so worn out after facing it that he couldn't even explain. The goal of the journey was to defeat the evil god who revived every millennium. They would gain the blessing of each of the great spirits and unleash the ancient weapons. That would make them even stronger. Saving people from monsters served as training to defeat the evil god. Fiona saw that she was called a heroine while Gray was referred to as a wizard. A class defined the battle role set by the selector. Hero was the most important. Only he could wield the sacred sword. But Gray wouldn't tell her that. Fiona knew Gray too well to think he wanted to be a champion too. He replies that wasn't the case, and she asks why he wanted to become one then. The group headed to a weapon shop, where Fiona picked up a sword, impressed. It was obvious they were novices, by their expressions and the way they carried the weapons. Fiona shows that Gray was a novice too, besides her. The blacksmith suggests they leave soon because several novices had disappeared. He didn't want his weapons wasted. Fiona found it scary that demons were targeted by beginners. Gray doubted they were actually demons. Fiona asks how he could say that, and he starts to answer just as a person appears behind Fiona. They grabbed Gray and Fiona and covered their mouths at the same time. The protagonist knew exactly who those guys were. They were led to another location and pushed to the ground. They ordered them to act obediently or they would kill the girl with them. Gray got his face kicked while Fiona checked if her brother was okay. She was fine too, despite everything. Suddenly Ezekiel comments that they were quite unlucky to get involved in this. Gray was surprised to see him there, although Ezekiel himself didn't know who he was. Ezekiel Iglesias was a tank who joined Gray's team in his past life. At that time, they were surrounded by several demons in battle. Only when they were so close to the evil god and Fiona was targeted. At that moment, Gray shouted for his sister to get away from the attack. But Ezekiel was the one who protected her so the others could defeat the monsters. Ezekiel, however, was the target of several attacks at once. Even so, he shouted for his companions to go on because he had faith they could win. To defeat the evil god and save the world, Gray didn't want to, but Fiona took him with her. Ezekiel died before the evil god was found. He was the second companion Gray wanted to save. They were supposed to meet him at another time, but apparently, he was caught by bandits this time. Ezekiel jokes that even with Gray staring at him, he just liked well-endowed women. Ezekiel tells that he was having fun with a woman at the bar and suddenly appeared there. Now he was furious because he was interrupted right at the best moment. Fiona sighed at this behavior. Ezekiel was still the same as Gray remembered. The rumors about novices disappearing in the city seemed to be true. If they wanted someone to capture and sell, ordinary citizens would be better. Gray says they wanted champions. The bandits were eyeing them for some reason. These people were known as champion hunters. Some lords wanted to buy champions to join their forces. People who capture and sell champions were called champion hunters. Fiona couldn't believe that people did such things to others. Ezekiel agrees they were all idiots, but he could understand why they wanted champions. It was sponsored by the agency. Hunters capture inexperienced champions and sell them for high value. Gray was captured on purpose so they could stop the hunt for heroes. They were connected to the first tragedy, and the region Gray cherished was destroyed. Ezekiel questions how he knew so much, suspecting the protagonist. Gray replies that it doesn't matter. They had to hurry and escape. He pretended to sleep to find out where they were being taken, but they still couldn't free themselves from the bindings. Gray responds that it wasn't a problem. He would free them all now, so he uses his eye, and Ezekiel's and Fiona's bindings come loose. Even Ezekiel was left wondering how Gray did such a thing. He replies that he just used telekinesis and freed everyone else too. Gray says that now they should all go and opens the doors to escape. The champions are worried because the hunters should be much stronger, and the protagonist says he saw their weapons so they could get them back on the way. They storm into the room where the weapons were, and everyone retrieves them. Ezekiel and Fiona feel calmer now that they are armed again. They were all safe and just needed to deal with the bandits. Fiona tells her brother to go together, but Gray asks her to wait. There were several other cells, and Gray wanted to free everyone first. Ezekiel says it wasn't bad on his part and would accompany him. Meanwhile, the bandits were questioning the imprisoned champions. They even wanted to have fun beating one of them to pass the time. Suddenly they hear a noise and turn around. It was Ezekiel commenting on how they had dirty hobbies. The bandits charge at him the moment they see he has freed himself. and Ezekiel defends himself easily from their weak attacks. Such attacks don't work, and Ezekiel sends them all flying. The other bandit runs away, worried because this guy wasn't even a rookie. Fiona wouldn't let him escape like that, and quickly uses her sword to land an attack. Ezekiel praises her for being good, and Fiona replies that she trained a lot after everything. The fight continues, and they manage to save even more people. They finally found the exit, and could now leave. When they stepped out, they soon saw they were surrounded by several armed people. A hunter sighs because the goods should stay quiet and not try to escape. All the rookie hunters were defeated, and he orders the remaining ones to drop their weapons, unless they want to be hit by a rain of arrows right now. Fiona didn't want to surrender so easily. But the bandit shows he had hostages, and they couldn't refuse now. In light of this, Fiona and Ezekiel drop their weapons with a heavy sigh. As punishment for the rebellion, the hunter decides he would kill the man and use the woman. One of the hunters approaches to grab Fiona. He liked seeing the disgusted look on her face, but then he stopped for a moment when he saw something was off. When Fiona looked, the guy was dead behind her from an ice magic. Gray used his attack to keep that guy away from Fiona. The other bandits tell him to stop because they still had hostages, but Gray takes care of them right away without worrying about anything. The hunter shouts for the others to kill the mage right now. They shoot hundreds of arrows in the direction of the protagonist. Fiona steps in front, worried about her brother, but Gray holds her close and uses his magic again to protect himself. He freezes all the arrows and then kills several of the hunters. He left behind the last hunter, and Gray asks what he intended to do now. The man grabs his weapon and charges at the protagonist, furious. Gray dodges, questioning if that was all he had after being so scared. He was nothing but a lowly thief, and Gray dodges his new attack. The bandit gets enraged because he was being looked at this way. Then Gray warns above him, and the man looks up, just as a huge ice magic was prepared to hit him. After the fight ended, the champions thank Gray for saving their lives. Gray replies that they didn't have to worry and hands them a bag to take and leave. It was a bag full of gold that the champion hunters had with them. He hoped those people could save even more people. Then Gray fell to his knees, the effect of using such strong magic still affecting his weak body. Ezekiel approaches, commenting that he wasn't an ordinary mage. The protagonist asks what he was talking about. He was just a rookie. Still, Ezekiel had never seen a rookie do all this and asks if he could join him on his team. Gray agrees, thanking Ezekiel for his help, and stands up. Ezekiel still didn't understand how Gray knew his name, but it was fine for now. Everything about him was quite strange. Back in the city, Fiona was exhausted. It had been a long way from the hideout. After taking responsibility, it was impossible for the guys to come back after what Gray did to them. Fiona just wanted to hurry and take a shower. She bumps into someone, causing their donut to fall to the ground. She quickly apologizes and promises she would buy another one. In front of her, a woman tells her to kneel and beg for forgiveness. Another woman tells Brenda that she understood her excitement, but being angry over food was embarrassing. Brenda corrects herself. It was a noble's duty to show leniency to the commoners. Behind her, Katrin agrees with Brenda no matter what she says. Brenda realizes that Fiona's group was the type that just started their journey, and asks if they knew about the missing champions. She was all convinced about saving them, to which Fiona happily responds that everything was resolved. Brenda loses all her aura of pride in an instant. Fiona says that her brother took care of the bandits. He saved all the missing people too. Brenda couldn't believe that the person who ignored her was the one who solved the case. Fiona was left confused and even heard her name wrong. Brenda says she was an Einhorn, a family of rulers for generations, full of strong swordsmen. Fiona gets annoyed because Brenda insulted Gray by saying he used dirty methods. In that case, Brenda challenges him to judge her strength and dignity. The protagonist saw no reason to fight. He was fine with her boasting about being strong. Brenda gets irritated because he was saying her name so boldly. In her past life, Brenda was a rival of Gray's team. They never united, but helped each other sometimes. Since Brenda was ignored, she became furious and decided to attack first. Even Katrin was sent flying with her power. Ezekiel defends himself, hardly believing that this girl was so stubborn. Brenda prepares her attack with her sword and approaches Gray. Her family had tough times, but Brenda's power was very real. To prevent them from getting hurt, Gray decided he would use his evil eye. She launches an attack with her sword, and Gray steps back. Brenda is left confused as to how she missed him. He was dodging effortlessly. While she questions, Gray prepares to counterattack. Thus, she loses the sword from her hand and Brenda is sent flying. Gray prevents her from falling and asks if she is okay. He didn't want to fight her. Brenda pushes him away, outraged that someone like him touched her. She decides to leave with no time to waste on these guys. Brenda knew that Gray hadn't taken the fight seriously from the start. She would want revenge. Fiona was worried about letting her leave like that, but Gray replied that she would calm down later. Ezekiel asks why they are going to a cemetery, to visit a grave or something like that. Gray replies that he wanted to borrow something, and the others look confused. And suddenly, a hidden staircase appears before them. This grave belonged to a champion from 1,000 years ago named Albert, known as Aegis. Ezekiel didn't understand how an ordinary person like Gray could know so much. Gray realized during the chaos with the hunters that he had to get armor for Fiona quickly. The place was huge. They couldn't even imagine there would be a corridor like this beneath the grave. It was a location protected by a divine shield from the ancient champion. During the journey, Gray felt something strange and turned to look back. It was probably another rat and spider, and he decided to ignore it. The group continued until they reached a large door. Fiona approached and opened the door. This was the guardian of the grave, ensuring that the armor of evil goes to the worthy. The armor says to grant 6 trials of the agency of salvation. Fiona asks what that is and if they have it, and Gray agrees. They just had to take it by force. They had no time to play with the guardian to start with, and so the protagonist decided they would be stealing the armor. The armor gets angry because the insolent humans were violating the laws. Gray got tired of hearing it talk, provoking it to punish them soon. Then the armor begins to prepare to attack. It drew a sword and charged at him immediately. Ezekiel defended Gray, questioning if he was crazy to pick a fight like that. The protagonist says they weren't going to steal, just borrow it for a bit. Fiona shouts a warning because something was above him. It was a magic that flew by and hit the armor squarely. Brenda's group appeared just in time after following them there. She gets annoyed because once again Fiona got her last name wrong. The champion's armor was better suited for a noble like her. It would save the world and make her queen. Katrin worries if everything is really okay, and Brenda doesn't care. She decides to charge at the armor, and her partner Jake follows her. Stella kept casting healing spells for them. Katrin also started providing help with fire magic. Thus, the place became a battlefield filled with magic and swords. Brenda clashes her sword with the armor, and Jake accompanies her to defend her. It wasn't long before Brenda was hit by an attack from the armor, and Stella quickly came to help using her healing magic. Brenda laughed. They couldn't stop the Einhorn family with such attacks. Their teamwork was incredible. Brenda was a good leader, even being arrogant. But even with them being high class, the armor wasn't going to give up. The protagonist shouts for Brenda to be careful because something was coming. She laughs because a mere commoner was trying to give her orders. Then suddenly she saw that the armor in front of her disappeared. She turns around, wondering where it went. It was when they saw that the armor mortally wounded Stella. Brenda gets furious and turns to fight against him. But again she teleports and appears behind the swordswoman in the blink of an eye. Jake shouted for her and tried to help her, but another attack came secretly. Katrin was also knocked down as a result of the chaos on the battlefield. Gray realizes he was teleporting and needed to defend them, so he begins to prepare something using his evil eye. New attacks come in, this time hitting the armor squarely. Brenda ran to help Stella and shouted for her to stay with her. Gray was going to curse Stella with a time gift so her wound wouldn't worsen, but he had to find a healing specialist. Brenda complains because he would take the armor for himself when they hadn't lost. However, they were all injured after the battle. As a member of her family, Brenda would never consider backing down at such times. Gray suddenly has his eye working, seeing Brenda's death and all her group. Brenda almost laughed seeing him cry when he had never even been able to defeat her. In her previous life, Brenda generally got in his way. Even in the end, she acted alone and they lost a lot of battle strength. For Fiona to live, Brenda had to work with her too. The protagonist asks her to withdraw now. He couldn't let her die like this. In response, Brenda turns all red again. Then she agrees, but they would settle things later. Brenda felt the humiliation of a lifetime, but saw how serious Gray was about it. She wonders what he meant by not letting her die like this. She couldn't stand that man, but Brenda and her group withdrew. Ezekiel asks if they could just let them go like this, even when they could have reinforcements. But Gray preferred to have fewer people to protect, because this was an opponent far from ordinary. The armor returned attacking the protagonist with its sword, and Fiona comes to attack from above as well, but then the armor appeared behind her, teleporting. Gray used ice magic and defended her from the incoming attack. He could handle this. It was dangerous if he appeared behind her. Ezekiel positioned himself in front of Fiona to protect her from the attacks. Then Gray took responsibility for primarily fighting against the armor, and soon it teleported to his back as well, but he defended himself from the attack with his ice magic. The magic stuck to the sword and hit the armor after catching it in its own trap. But even so, it managed to teleport to the protagonist's back. It unleashed a powerful attack while Fiona screamed for her brother. Gray dodged, but was left confused about what happened as he was sure he had caught it. But then he noticed something was wrong. Now he could see they had been wrong about this all along. The armor said he was not fit to be the champion of salvation, but Gray replied that it couldn't matter less to him. It wasn't her who would decide that, so he prepared once more. hitting the armor with magic time and again. It was then clear that there wasn't one, but 4 of them all this time. Gray was sure he had caught it in the attack, but when it reappeared unscathed, he thought of that possibility. There were several of them, and by becoming invisible, it could deceive its opponents, making it seem like it teleported. The armor perished, but would not recognize the protagonist as worthy. But for Gray, it was fine anyway. Now he would make the armor melt with his own magic anyway. When it was over, Gray fell to his knees and Fiona came to his aid. He said he was fine, just a little tired, barely staying conscious. Suddenly they noticed something appeared in front of them. When they looked, it was the cursed armor of evil. A figure appeared laughing, as he never imagined the Guardians would be defeated. Fiona was startled by the ghost, but Ezekiel thought it was some kind of memory. Gray told Champion Albert that they needed his armor for perfect salvation and would return it. Alberto questioned why he was there because it was all his fault. He began to shout not to be deceived, but before revealing his identity, he disappeared. Ezekiel was confused and Fiona asked if Gray and Albert were friends. He denied having ever seen him before, and Gray worried if Albert mistook him for someone. Anyway, the most important part now was something else. Fiona should wear the armor, even if she didn't feel worthy of it. Gray replied that he wanted to protect her, so he asked her to do it for her own good. Fiona put on the armor, asking if it looked good on her. Gray and Ezekiel agreed that it looked good on her. She laughed because she actually really liked it. They had finished what to do there, and Ezekiel asks where they would go now. In the city of Radred, it was a fortress situated between the Kelsus and Flamma Mountains, a place where the fall of humanity began. In the past life, the demon invasion was much worse. People referred to the fallen city as the first tragedy and one of the worst, but this tragedy had not yet happened in this version. If Gray could stop the invasion, then they would have time to gather strength and keep Fiona alive. The sister grabbed several snacks after showing her champion license, and Gray was surprised, asking when she bought all this. She heard that they could have baths and clothes at the inn if they showed their license. Ezekiel says that the lords would have problems with everything being destroyed by demons, so they must be sponsoring champions like this. So Fiona and the group approach to check in at the inn. The owner welcomes them and says that the store was free to use for any champion. During the meal, Ezekiel mentions that it was strange. The way everyone looked at him was as if they were scared. Gray thinks this actually made sense. Suddenly a voice shouts for it to stop, pleading. The man grabbed the waitress to make her entertain him. Another man asked to let her go because this wasn't that kind of place. But the man punched the shouting man in the face to shut him up. The man was angry because they thought they had the right to deny things to champions. He intended to teach a lesson to the waitress once and for all. Anyone who tried to go against them would meet the same end. Fiona was the one who stood up and placed herself in the path of that champion. She would not let him do what he wanted and hurt more people. When the strong city of Radred fell, several excellent defenses crumbled with it. The reason was the hero hunters. There were few people in the fortress due to the disappearances. And then, there were the deaths of rivals that were happening. And finally, the dirty champions who were destroying Radred. The champion laughed because a girl was trying to talk to an adult like that. Then he charged at her, deciding to show a lesson. He was too slow and Fiona jumped over him. She tried to strike with her sword, but the man defended himself with his unscathed arm. Then he sent her back as if nothing had happened. Fiona was surprised because her armor withstood the movement. She received a strong attack, but the armor absorbed it, and Fiona resumed fighting. Still, none of her attacks did anything to the man. The champion grabbed Fiona's arm and stopped her, and then he threw her to the ground with a move. Her attacks didn't even leave scratches on that champion, and he laughed because she really seemed to be trying to attack with all she had. Then it was time to teach a lesson. He wasn't going to hold back just because she was a little girl. But suddenly a fire magic appeared behind the champion. It was Gray who came to Fiona's defense, warning that touching her would mean death. The champion showed off because his weapon was his own body. Nothing could scratch him. Gray asked if he wanted to test and see if that was really true. The man got angry because they were underestimating the resilience of his body. He would make Gray regret speaking ill of him like that. The champion attacked him and caused destruction. Fiona screamed for him. The others were worried because the guy was a monster and surely Gray was dead from that. The champion laughed because he crushed a person to dust with a punch. Behind him, Gray asked where he was looking after all. The guy tried to throw another punch, but Gray disappeared again. This time he hit and sent him flying, following up with several punches. Gray broke through the wall with the final punch. The champion hoped that this would be enough for him to have won. And again, Gray appeared behind him, wanting to know if it was over. The champion was confused about how he could be fine after all that. He used the secret defense of body strengthening, Iron Body. After being provoked, the man again decided to attack him, but this time his fist stopped mid-air, leaving him confused about what was happening. Gray laughed because he should have limits on how slow someone can be. There were chains holding his arms while he attacked uselessly without stopping. That was how he trapped him in his mana chains. It didn't take long for him to see that he really couldn't move at all. The protagonist agreed that he should be careful. The chains bind his existence. Forcing would hurt his soul. Now it was time to pay for his sins for having hurt innocent people. The man screamed to stop over and over again as the chains tightened around him. Gray wonders if it was possible since the tests had no limits. He didn't intend to kill him, however. He would make him his messenger after all. He should tell his leader to stop devouring Radred and leave. As soon as they threw the man out, Gray apologizes for ruining the shop and would pay for the repairs, but the man was surprised. He and the waitress bid farewell to the champions, thanking them for their help. Gray tells the group that the city was being controlled by the hero Georg. He was misusing the champions' diplomacy to control people through fear. He argued that he would protect the city in exchange for doing whatever he wanted, which was a lie. Although when the demons attacked, they would take the money and flee. Ezekiel asks how he knew so much, and Gray replies that he has private sources. In any case, he left a warning and hoped they could spend the night somewhere. Fiona, however, had a worried look behind. Meanwhile, the group leader heard the message that they were threatened to leave. The champion tells Georg that the guy was too powerful. One of them says it was this champion who must be an idiot to be fooled like that. Another agrees because he had never heard of a gray shepherd before in his life. A third agrees that they should kill him once and for all. Two of them fight because one was mixing magical illicit substances that were toxic. Finally, Georg shouts for those idiots to shut up. Some idiot was trying to boss him around in his own city. Just killing wasn't enough. They had to finish him off and use him as an example. At the inn, Gray's group was resting. Fiona thought she couldn't do anything with her own hands, always failing outside the city. She would become a burden at this rate. She was sure of it. Gray appeared knowing she must be tired and says she should rest. He didn't intend to sleep yet because Gray would use all the time to perfect his magic. Then Fiona teases him by flicking his forehead, because he was frowning and looking tense. He was trying to do everything alone again. If he was worried about something, he could talk about it. Fiona asks if there was a problem, and Gray sighs at her clever observation. He needed to value time as much as possible. After all, Gray could never recover this in his previous life. Meanwhile, Georg's group invaded the city looking for Gray. They beat those who refused to talk or said they knew nothing. They would do anything to find Gray, otherwise, they would kill the civilians. A figure came out opening the door to her room when they invaded the inn. It was Fiona. One of the men saw that she was a beautiful woman. Fiona warns him not to mess with them, although it was a low murmur, and she takes down the men with a swift attack when they least expected it. She couldn't let her brother be the one fighting alone all the time. The men gather when Fiona stands in front of them. She was very strong, and soon all of them ran away in despair. Gray always knew his sister was scary when she got angry. They couldn't do this. The men ran away to escape. They wanted to report back to Georg that everything had gone wrong. Ezekiel appears grabbing one of those trying to flee after leaving the bar. The guys really thought they could escape the inn without even apologizing. So Ezekiel put the guys back inside the inn, preventing them from fleeing. He still wasn't sober, but it was the perfect opportunity for an exercise. After getting beaten, they say they were under Georg's orders. The champions of this city were a disgrace. Ezekiel says they would never regret it. They would never have taken the city if they were half-hearted like that. Gray agrees, but these guys had intentions. They should move on for now. It was time to clean up. He would make sure no parasite remained there. Meanwhile, a man was in shock because it should be a nightmare, and one of Georg's champions appears to tell the man that it was the end of the line for him. He pleads to wait because he would win this time and give the money they demanded. But the champion knew this guy was deep in debt at this point. The man cries desperately because he was forced to gamble and lost everything he had. It was clear that the game was also rigged. They were lying to his face, which irritates the champion at such an accusation, and he kicks the man's face for talking nonsense. When he starts to beat the man, he begs for forgiveness. The champion smiles because he wasn't a demon. He would clear his debts if he sold his daughter and wife. The man refuses because they were his treasures, and the champion laughs because they had already done that anyway. The man freezes, completely shocked, and the champion laughs in his face as his wife and daughter are worth good money. The man becomes furious and the champion kicks him away. He intended to sell him next time. They would take care of giving him to demons that eat human flesh. It should be good since his family was gone anyway. Then he attacks the man next, but Fiona steps between him and the man to defend against the attack. The champion is surprised by the pretty girl, wondering how much she could be worth. Several others prepare to fight because they knew Fiona was one of the people Georg wanted. Ezekiel makes sure they fight against him instead of gathering around him. Gray prepares his telekinesis to start fighting as well. The attacks come, and he, alongside Ezekiel, prepares to settle the score. Fiona faces the champion who provokes her. She didn't want to know about his schemes. The champion says the city belongs to his governor. They only collected taxes from those who lived there. They were indeed powerful, and everyone else was just weak. The man fires several consecutive attacks at Fiona. She defends herself. The guy was fast and barely had a chance to counterattack. The champion laughs, asking what happened, and if that was all she had to offer. Then now would come his graceful attack against her. Fiona was knocked down and Gray turns worried about his sister. She gets up, responding that she was fine. Fiona wanted to show her brother that she wasn't a burden. She wonders how she would defeat the spearman, although the champion feels it was getting tiresome. He fires several more attacks at her, which she defends while looking for an opening. Finally, Fiona sees the stance he prepares for the final attack. It was her opportunity. She could take advantage of this advantage. And so the spearman launches an attack towards Fiona, and she strikes his spear with her sword, piercing it and startling the champion, thus breaking his sword and body into 2 pieces. Fiona fell to her knees as the battle came to an end. Gray asks if she was okay, and Fiona asks if she did a good job. He agrees that she did really well. And in that case, Fiona gets up, deciding that she could still keep fighting. The last fight was dangerous because she wasn't wearing her armor. Gray also had to get stronger to protect her, however. For some reason, he didn't feel the pain of the curse going away. Meanwhile, Georg's other champion laughed, not believing he had so much food in stock. There was a lot of quality stuff, and they could make money if they sold everything. Suddenly, a guard alerts the champion that this was a supply for emergencies, but he silences the man with an attack because none of that mattered to him. If they got hungry, they could eat stones or anything like that. The champion didn't care about the people of the city. Fiona says these guys were really trash, and Ezekiel agrees even though the cleanup was going well. The men rush at them to fight because they recognize they were the ones Georg was looking for. After quickly taking care of them, it was time to find the 3rd champion. They head to the underground where several people were imprisoned for experiments. There were several addicted people who also wanted more magical illicit substances. The champion promises he would give more. In exchange, he should give his children if he had any. The rest should steal them. And they run off, promising they would do anything for more magical illicit substances. They were all people being used by their vices. The champion enjoys watching people break. He would end anyone who had a happy life. Fiona appeared next, calling them all true scum. The champion laughed upon recognizing that it must be the famous team in the city, but it didn't take long for Gray to silence him with a huge explosion. Georg heard reports that the factory of magical illicit substances was burned by Gray. All the champions were defeated, and he was furious for them doing such a thing. Finally, the boss was the only one left to deal with these guys from the city. Before everything, they had to act before he decided to flee. Ezekiel was tired, and suggests they could rest and continue the next day. Although Gray tries to deny it, Ezekiel drags him along and leaves Fiona taking care of the children. She tells the children that everything would be fine, and the authorities would arrive soon. Later, the parents take their children and everything is resolved safely. When she returned to the inn, she wonders if Gray went back to his room. She heard them saying not to tell Fiona. Ezekiel says that the mana balance in his body was all messed up. If he keeps pushing himself, he would destroy the meridians in his body and end his life. Fiona couldn't believe that Gray was trying so hard. He knew his limits and was always training his body to surpass them. If it were possible to have a world where Fiona was happy, his life was a cheap price. Georg was the only one left. They needed to take care of this soon. In parallel, Georg's champions said they should steal and flee as quickly as possible. That's when Fiona appeared, startling the men and asking who she was. It was then they recognized she was one of Gray's group and were frightened. She quickly dealt with them as they prepared to kill her. She was quiet and silent during the battle. She would never let her brother go too far and hurt himself like that again. When Fiona finished, a person appeared saying that getting rid of useless trash for a brat was actually good. It was Georg who asked who dared to mess with his city. He wouldn't rest until he finished them all. He attacked her, preparing to kill her. In the past, Georg was the winner of the Grand Tournament of the Year. Everyone praised him for his fencing and for defeating the Wizard of the Wallenstein's family. Everyone celebrated, and Georg swore he would always meet everyone's expectations. And now he was furious to take down each one of them who messed with his city. He attacked Fiona, who defended herself with some difficulty, to the point that Fiona's sword eventually broke, to her shock. Georg's technique was to destroy his targets. He would slice her up the same way. Now it was her turn, but before the attack could hit, something surprised him. A high-rank magical barrier protected her. This was the defense of one of the sacred armors. Fiona said it was an important armor her brother gave her. He would never be able to pierce through the armor like that. If he couldn't hurt her, then Georg decided to finish her off in other ways, so he threw a spiked ball in front of her. The spiked ball went towards Fiona to hold her. Purgatory's Cage was a spell that isolates the target and blocks physical interference. Although dark magic was banned, he was still quite skilled at it. He could enjoy losing consciousness while entering despair. Georg just watched her in this bizarre scene. Now that the woman was neutralized, he wondered if he should finish her off. As he tried to decide what to do, Georg stepped back when an attack came from the ground. It was Gray who said he made the right choice not to kill her right away. Georg saw he rushed to save his little sister, which was a shame because he was a hero and wouldn't be defeated. Ezekiel recognized he was powerful. This kind of opponent was a problem for wizards. But Gray was determined because anyone who hurt Fiona would meet their end at his hands. So he unleashed a giant and powerful attack against Georg. The man countered the attack, swinging his sword against the magic blast. His sword was capable of cutting through even flames, and it would work well on his flesh too. He charged at Gray next. Gray questioned how he could act like that when he was so strong. Champions had to protect people. Georg replied that he would never understand. He had never faced a high-rank demon. It wasn't something humanity could win against. Instead of saving the world, it made sense to take all the wealth possible and survive. After all, this was an era where champions could do as they pleased. Gray said he was pathetic, scared of losing to a demon like that, which infuriated Georg even more, and he used his purgatory cage on him too. He would make that man swallow it. Gray was held by the spikes right after. Ezekiel was shocked to see what unfolded before him, while Georg laughed because this was a barrier that only its creator could open and close. That's when a strong light emerged from within the spikes. From inside the spikes, several roses appeared as Gray rescued Fiona. Georg was in shock. It should have been impossible for them to survive. Gray denied the mana absorption with his spell and quickly dealt with the barrier. From within, it was originally made by a demon. A human shouldn't know how to use it. The previous Lancer also seemed to use demon things, even when they should fight against them. Fiona apologized for causing trouble again. Gray replied it was okay. Then he asked Ezekiel to take care of his sister now. Georg realized it was a mistake. He should never have trusted a wizard's tool. After all, a swordsman should kill with his sword. In that case, he would show the technique he trained and used during the grand tournament, and Georg prepared an attack that came quickly in his direction. Ezekiel defended Fiona while the attack came to hit Gray. He disappeared with the attack hitting him directly. They couldn't even believe it. Nothing of your body remained. Georg laughed because Gray was incapable of overcoming even a human. But Gray appeared behind him. For in the end, even with the sword, he was incompetent. He was able to easily surpass his attack, just felt his power and avoided it. Georg could hardly believe he lost even being a champion. It was then that magical chains held him by the legs, and then several spears appeared above his head. Gray replied that if he was a champion, he should be able to handle all of this. And finally, the battle against him ended as the attacks hit Georg. Back at the inn, Ezekiel asked what they should do now that they had dealt with the parasites. Gray said they would stay in the city. It was almost time for the sacred water spirit to give its blessing. Fiona got excited because she had never seen a spirit before. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, even though it was so late. Outside, 3 people were standing. The man introduced himself as the Lord of Radred, Orlando Greshel, and his son Heinz Greshel. Gray and his group also introduced themselves to the Lord of the city. Orlando came as soon as he heard that Georg was defeated and wanted to deliver a reward. In the chest, there was an immeasurable amount of gold coins. Gray questioned what exactly this was after all. Orlando and Heinz begged for forgiveness because if that wasn't enough, they could have more. Gray replied that they would not extort them. He could only use the money on the people themselves. This took both the Lord and his son by surprise. Heinz thanked Gray because they were very grateful. They could hardly survive without someone to stop Georg. Since they killed his grandmother, they were forced to close their eyes to everything that happened. Gray was happy to hear that they were willing to go so far, and there was something he actually wanted. To start with, he wanted to know if he could get some employees from the Academy Guild. He was then presented with a formula that starts with Haoma grass extract. Manufacturing the spell, the extract would act as a catalyst and draw a lot of mana from the evil stone, and if he could crystallize the mana afterward. Thus, they could achieve an extremely potent mana restoration. The guild guys never believed such a thing was possible, such pure restoration. Haoma grass and the evil stones were abundant in the Flamma Mountains. They could produce and sell. Heinz said he could leave it in their hands. He had a merchant guild that would cooperate to sell. Fiona thought the stones were beautiful. Even Ezekiel was impressed, and asked where he learned this. Gray replied that he had experimented with a lot on his own. Although he had researched a lot about reviving Fiona, and that included creations like this. Heinz asked if he wouldn't visit their mansion now. They would prepare a banquet for the great heroes who saved the city. Gray replied that they would stay for a while, but he would take a walk around the city to see if some of Georg's men were still around. When Fiona insisted, he took her along. Ezekiel decided to go out to see someone. Fiona knew he was going out to hit on another woman for sure. She hoped Gray would never be like that. And on the way, he bumped into someone. The girl fell apologizing because she wasn't watching her way. Gray bent down to help and apologized because he hadn't seen her either. It was then that he was startled when he saw her. The girl shrank back, apologizing. But suddenly Gray asked her to accompany him, because he needed her, and the girl was startled by his words. Even Fiona was shocked because she thought her brother would never be that kind of man. The girl stepped back, not understanding what Gray wanted from her. He replied that she would regret staying where she was. She needed to get rid of them before committing a serious crime. The girl was Sasha Flores, the former healer of his team. At this point, Sasha was a prisoner and was sent by acquaintances of a group called Rival Killers, who eliminate other champions. Sasha was forced to work for them. Many people died and her hands were stained with blood. When Gray freed Sasha from those guys in the past, her mind was already broken. She carried a lot of guilt, was unable to fight in the end, and died. But now Gray had the chance to save her as long as Sasha was by his side. Fiona didn't hide her shock because he knew her full name. Sasha said that if she ran away, she would end up being killed, but Gray assured her that he would protect her. Fiona didn't understand why he was acting like this with someone he had just met. Then Sasha apologized and ran away because she couldn't do this. Gray was left behind, worried, and then he saw the way his sister was looking at him in judgment. He didn't think he was a seduction artist, and Gray was left confused. Meanwhile, Sasha was wondering who that guy was. He saw through her, even without knowing why. It didn't seem like the first time they had met. It was when suddenly she felt a pain in her chest. For some reason, Sasha saw Gray's face crying. She kept wondering what that was, perhaps some kind of illusion. Suddenly a voice appears after finally finding her. They were men who said that if she lost her job, she should come back for good. She apologizes as she understood the position she was in. One of the men asks where they would hunt next time. The other says that the Temple of the Water Spirit would be better. Several champions would show up. The third got excited about turning the temple into a hell on earth. Sasha didn't want to help them or become an assassin. She wanted to become a champion and help others. She wonders if Gray could really help her, and she starts to apologize and hesitate in her thoughts. It was when they grabbed her by the neck and made her stop talking immediately. The champion didn't like the look in her eyes, like a dog biting its owner's hand. It wasn't necessary for her to think. She was nothing more than a substitute for a potion. Or maybe she just wanted to die like her previous team. Then he throws her to the ground right after. Another champion starts kicking Sasha for daring to turn against them like that. The third says that a dirty dog should just follow its owner's orders, and so she begins to apologize for having such audacity. In parallel, a large sum of gold was presented to Gray. Heinz suggested using it to build a house for them in the city, but he refused. They would use it to repair the fortress and prepare the city. Heinz was confused as to why they should use the money to reward Gray, and he replies that money would have no value if the world ended. The city's survival was more important. Everyone was emotional because Gray was the best champion of all to them. Heinz was moved. As desired, they would protect the city. He could leave it in their hands because protecting people was a lord's duty. Gray felt that the city had a good lord. Heinz would become a good heir in the future. While they celebrated, Fiona was impressed with her brother. But everything happened very quickly, and she was getting scared. She was rescued again by Gray, even when she had always protected him some time ago, and wonders when exactly he grew up and left her behind. Maybe he thinks Fiona is completely useless now, so she withdrew, visibly dejected. Gray saw this and tried to call her, but they called his name first. They wanted to discuss how to strengthen the city and would use their time. Gray saw that his sister didn't seem well, but decided to suggest using weapons and soldiers to strengthen the city. Heinz says that his father left him in charge of the defenses and would do everything possible. Gray comments that they trusted him, but Heinz thinks it was nepotism. It was nothing compared to Gray. Gray saw that Heinz was far from being like other arrogant rulers. He also wanted to strengthen the walls, and the men agreed. They still had little time until the demon attack. They had to prepare as much as possible. To face the evil god, they needed the blessing of the great spirits. The time of the great water spirit was near. They would end up finding Sasha and her group. In the best scenario, they would solve two problems at once. Gray withdrew, leaving things in Heinz's hands. He went out to look for his sister and suddenly heard a scream. It was Fiona who was training with the sword. She wanted to get stronger. She couldn't be a burden to her brother. Gray approached as he found her, and she asks if he thought she was useless, and he asks back what she meant by that. Fiona felt she was taking up space. She was weak and couldn't do anything alone. Then Gray approaches, saying that she was strong and knew it more than anyone. She had always saved him. Now it was his turn to protect her. Gray had faith in her and asks her to never say such a thing. Fiona thanks him for his words, and suddenly someone calls Gray. It was Heinz who came to warn that dinner would be ready soon. Fiona still wanted to train, and Gray comments that Ezekiel should be drinking in some nearby bar, which was strange, and Heinz mentions that since the city was liberated, he didn't seem to have gone to any bar. In parallel, in some other place, Georg was chained up. A person enters and greets Georg, who was awake. It was Ezekiel, who asks how he was doing. Georg complains because he had been there for days, and Ezekiel says it was surprising he could still talk. Ezekiel knew that Georg should still have some guys in the city. Georg asks what exactly he was thinking. They knew they were in contact with demons through their tools and magical illicit activities. In short, Ezekiel deduced that there was a traitor in the city and wanted to know who it was. But Georg refuses to say who that person was. He could hardly wait for the day he would kill them all, and Ezekiel punches him squarely. Neither Gray nor Fiona knew he was there, and he realized it was better to extract information quickly. Georg laughs because he was just pretending to be a normal champion. This way of obtaining information was different from the others, and even with him being punched time and again, Georg smiles because he had no intention of saying anything, and Ezekiel wonders how he could be so confident. Soon they would finish off everyone, and the people of the city would be torn to pieces. Georg could hardly wait for the bloodbath to come. Later, at the water temple, many champions were gathered. It was vital for the journey of salvation to have the blessing of the Great Spirit. The temple was beneath the lake so that people could not invade. The priest would perform the ceremony to remove the seal. Soon Brenda and her group also appear, and Stella even comments something malicious, although she disguises it. Fiona waves to Brenda, who again mispronounces her last name, and it almost seemed intentional. She points at Gray with irritation. She failed last time and was in debt, but this time would be different. Jake cheers for Brenda, and she stammers that she didn't want his concern, confusing Gray. Anyway, she wanted to move forward and receive the blessing first. Brenda didn't seem bad, so Ezekiel suggests letting her do what she wanted. However, both Gray and Ezekiel noticed the rival Slayers group. They were among the other gathered people and champions. A voice appears asking for permission to pass, and Gray turns around. It was Sasha who appeared and was startled to be recognized. Gray extends his hand, but again, Sasha was called by her group. The man promises to kill her otherwise, and she stammers as she joins them. She apologizes for being late and passes by the group. Gray tells his group that that girl was a prisoner. They maintained horrible attitudes and killed opponents to monopolize the glory of heroes. They killed Sasha's old team and forced her to heal their wounds non-stop. Again, Gray refuses to tell Ezekiel where he got his information, but Gray could tell that Ezekiel was starting to suspect him knowing so much. Suddenly, a voice yells that he was an idiot. Fiona turns around startled when the group hits Sasha in front of everyone. She knew she was going too far and wanted to stop them, but Gray holds her back as the ceremony was about to start. It was better to wait for the best opportunity to resolve this. Then the priest performs the ceremony to make the temple appear. Everything trembles and a path emerges from the water. The gates were opened. There was a limited number of blessings, and of course this made the champions rush to the temple. Fiona was impressed by how beautiful the temple was. Gray asks her not to let her guard down because it wasn't a tourist attraction. Suddenly Fiona was startled by what she saw. A monster was grabbing one of the champions. The spirits there would test who was worthy of the blessing. They could not die there. Sasha's group also made their way inside the temple. It was a good place full of blind spots. They would hide and set traps. The others would take care of the rest, waiting in the deep part of the temple to kill the champions who made it to the end. These people should be powerful and wonder if Sasha would be able to kill them. They would be tired from the traps and battles. It would be a good opportunity. Sasha didn't want to kill anyone and wasn't capable. She was just a healer. But still, she was there helping bad people. She remembers Gray saying she would regret staying where she was. One of the champions pushes her to stop standing still and do something useful. She apologizes, and she knew she would regret all of this. But Sasha thought she was too weak to do anything on her own. Finally, the room stopped being filled with so many monsters. A group of champions found the place safe, but the temple itself was madness. It seemed they were the first to arrive there. Since they were in front, they could take a break to catch their breath. But then one of them was attacked, and soon the others on the team went into shock. One from the group fired an attack when she noticed where the threat was coming from. Then she was caught off guard when the attack in question came from behind her. Soon the healer tried to heal and was targeted next by the Slayers group. They sighed because champions were useless outside of direct combat. One person who was still alive asks why they were doing this, and she had her hair pulled. The champion was going to make her scream now with the next attack. But suddenly ice magic was shot in his direction, stopping him. It was Gray who appeared to prevent that from continuing any longer. The champion tells him to stop getting in the way of his fun. The healer could still move, and orders to heal her companions now. And the champion gets irritated with Gray for provoking him this way. Suddenly he disappears, and Gray warns that if an assassin gets behind her, it would be over. The assassin laughed because he couldn't even avoid his attacks and was still careless. He decides to start by attacking Gray from behind. But suddenly a spell appeared beneath him that made him visible. Suddenly everyone became unable to see anything. and the champion saw that Gray blinded everyone with his magic, even his companions. He decides to be careful with his steps and how he breathes so as not to be noticed. But then Gray found him, locating him through mana instead of sound. When they could see again, the first champion had already been defeated. The group that was attacked thanks him for the help, even being rivals inside. Gray says they were facing the same enemy, which was the evil god and nothing more. The blessing was only for those who deserved it, not for those who rushed. And the priest only said those things to make everyone anxious. Ezekiel realizes that Gray was confident with such confidential information from the agency. In any case, the group that was attacked managed to leave safely and alive. Gray says they should continue on. There were still more of the killers ahead. In parallel, Brenda was killing a monster with her sword. Everyone applauds her impressive powers and she shows off. Such tests were child's play for someone from the Einhorn family. Suddenly someone says they seemed worthy of killing. It was one of the killers. He would never be satisfied no matter how many he killed. Brenda questions if he was part of the test or something like that. And he refuses, as his goal was only to get rid of those in his way. She could see he was the type who eliminated his rivals in front of him. In that case, Brenda could see the appeal and charges at him next. He comments that it was a good sword for a small girl. But then something sticks to Brenda's sword, and she wonders what that feeling was. She was getting weaker. Then suddenly she fell to the ground. Jake ran to help Brenda next, but was knocked down right after. He fell and knocked Katrin down as a consequence. Stella shouted for her companions without even seeing what was coming from behind her. Again, she was attacked from behind. Brenda questions what kind of dirty trick he had used, and he asks back if such a thing even existed on the battlefield. When Brenda thought she was going to die, suddenly Gray came to her rescue. The champion asks if he was really going to steal his prey, and Gray apologizes for bothering him, but she was important to him, and Brenda was immediately affected by his words. Gray shouts for Ezekiel to take those people to a safe place. Fiona would take care of the knight, and Gray asks her to wait because his cursed sword was dangerous. It could drain her vitality if she touched the sword, and Fiona decides she would avoid every attack. The champion asks how he could know all of this, and attacks Fiona, who dodges each of the attacks that came next. Frustrated, he prepares to kill Fiona as soon as she got closer, but Fiona avoids him again and pierces him with her sword. She celebrates because she took down one of the killers, and Gray agrees, although it was precisely what worried him. Her talent was so great that it was a tragedy. At this rate, it could end up repeating. Brenda says he didn't have to save him because they were going to win in the end, and Gray agrees. Fiona retorts that she was being ungrateful, and Brenda stammers that she didn't want help. If she had died in such an undignified way, she would never find her leader in hell. Suddenly, the champion stands up speaking with his Camillavard sword to free the stolen vitality and let them all die together, and out of nowhere the guy activates a kind of bomb to take everyone with him. Fiona pushes Gray so that he ends up far from the explosion, but she ends up falling when the ground breaks. Gray reaches out, but Fiona had already fallen and it was too late. She started to fall, knowing that at this rate she would die, but suddenly wings appeared. They were wings from the armor that kept her safe as she reached the ground. It was a long fall, but at least she was okay. Fiona worries if the others were okay, but knowing Gray, they should be. They would probably go deeper into the temple, and she should be able to find them later. On the way, Fiona discovers a very beautiful room. It was different from the rest of the temple, perhaps where the great spirit of water lived. She could hardly wait to find Sasha down there. Sasha was injured on her face and looked frightened at Fiona. She introduces herself as Gray's sister, and Sasha asks her to run away. The leader plans to kill everyone down there. He went to check on the others, but would be back soon. Fiona knew her brother was telling the truth. She had to save Sasha. She says they should escape. She couldn't stay with her team and promises to protect her. Fiona knew Sasha was a healer and could try to heal herself, but she responds that it would be a waste. It was only a matter of time before she got hurt again. What moved Fiona was hearing her depressing words, and she steps closer to hug her. She must have been used to getting hurt, and she would lose sight of everything if it continued like this. Sasha replies that maybe not seeing was better than this. She remembered Gray when he was mistreated in the village. Fiona was determined not to abandon her, and so she pulled her by the hand to leave, even though Sasha didn't think it was a good idea. Still, it had been a long time since she felt a gentle and warm touch. It was then that the team leader appeared, asking where she thought she was taking his dog. It seemed she needed a lesson, and so he went to attack Sasha. She froze in place, but Fiona dealt with the attack with her sword. She broke the spirit with one movement. She wasn't as weak as the leader thought. Fiona replied that no champion would hurt their companions like that. This made him laugh, asking if she knew why he chose the spirit temple. Because he was a spirit user, his power was even greater down there. Several spirits were summoned and sent in Fiona's direction, but she did not fear, wielding her sword against them, until she ended up being bitten by one of them along the way. She was surrounded, and the leader laughed because she became dog food. But a glow emerged from among the spirits as soon as he said that. The wings of her trap made Fiona fly away and surpass the spirits. They chased her, but she was determined to finish off the summoner first, which was a good choice but very foolish in the leader's opinion. She stopped, startled, and suddenly something emerged beneath her feet. A huge spirit appeared to swallow Sasha, who was right behind her. Ungrateful dogs trying to escape deserve punishment. As a healer, she would survive if half her body was torn off. The leader was cruel and just listened to Sasha begging for forgiveness, but he refused to forgive her even at that point. When Sasha was hurting herself, Fiona jumped to try to save her. She managed to hit the monster's eye, which was preparing to attack her too. But before that could happen, several barriers defended her afterward. The leader knew it was the power of a sacred relic, which was quite impressive. However, it was not infallible. He managed to break the barrier next with acid. Thus, Fiona was caught by his spirit afterward. Sasha screamed as soon as she saw her stop inside the monster's mouth, but she did not give up and began to come out from inside it using her sword. Sasha begged her to run away and just forget her, and she refused, because she promised she would, even though Sasha didn't understand why she would go so far for her. Fiona said that saving people from trouble was as natural for her as breathing, and so Sasha remembered that this was the kind of champion she always wanted to be. The ideal champion she aspired to was exactly like Fiona was. The leader did not give up. No matter how much she resisted, he would continue attacking. For Fiona, it still mattered to save the world, especially to save as many people as possible. A monster came from behind and knocked her down. The leader mocked her foolish ideals for thinking they could really do anything. This time he would be content to break her bones before ending her life. And he would make Sasha see everything so she would never dare to challenge him again. She begged him to leave Fiona alone, promising she wouldn't challenge him again. And the leader refused again. He needed to see what happened to those who refused to heed his words. It didn't take long for an attack to come and finish off the spirits. When they turned around, to the surprise of 0 people who came to the rescue was Gray. The leader was amused by the idea of making his brother watch his sister's death. But then Gray's eye activated, and the monster holding Fiona was destroyed next. She was fine, happy to see that her brother was okay too. The leader prepared to attack again, furious to kill everyone there. Gray had no intention of holding back. People who hurt others didn't deserve a funeral. Not that the leader thought any word like companions made sense to him. Still, their spirits were being destroyed one after another. His attack was a mistake, no matter how many spirits he defeated. Gray was aiming for the summoner too, and that's how his attack reached him next. Sasha merely watched this scene and saw that he was demanding to be healed. She agrees to heal, but a voice makes her stop before doing so. It was Gray asking if she really wanted to do that. Nothing would change if she healed him, neither his situation nor herself. Still, she was hesitating. The leader shouted that she had no choice. She was a useless trash who just stood by while her team died. Gray disagreed, because she was stronger than she thought. She was the best healer among the champions. Therefore, she could step forward. If she did, it would lead wherever she wanted to go. She felt emotional thinking about how she could save the world. The leader questioned why she was listening to him. It seemed he hadn't punished her enough. Then he sent a spirit to attack her, but it shattered into pieces when Fiona came to her rescue, assuring her that everything would be fine because they were taking care of her. After that, Sasha became more determined to do something. She prepared her staff to cast a healing spell, and the leader felt relieved to see that she was indeed ready to use the magic on him. But she used it on Fiona because Sasha would no longer help the villains. At that moment, the leader summoned the ugliest spirit in the world and threw it at them. Gray approached, saying that Sasha did very well now. She was powerful, and he said this while creating a barrier to defend against the attack. Resisting was useless. The leader was determined to kill them all. It was absurd. Riches and glories have no purpose if one is alone. They knew nothing. Their companions would arrive soon and finish them off. Gray replied that they had killed all of them a long time ago. This took him completely by surprise, as he was the last one remaining. Those who refuse to work for salvation have no place in the world Gray would create. Sasha mentally apologized to her group for the revenge for their deaths taking so long, but she would strive and follow that person who saved her. Later, Ezekiel said he saved the champions he encountered along the way, but they couldn't do much. Before, Fiona thought they were in the spirit room, and Gray showed that it was something else. The place changed as soon as he touched the fountain, and the great water spirit appeared before them. She said they had passed several tests and recognized them as suitable champions. She increased Sasha's capacity to cast healing spells. She would give the warrior the physical strength of a hero to Ezekiel. Fiona's armor would receive even more of her original portion of power, and Gray intended to receive a water spell, but he replied that it was something he already knew. The spirit was confused because no one would know such magic without passing through the temple. Gray responded that he preferred to improve his mana recovery. She retorted that it was the rules for him to receive the magic, and Gray sighed because she was as inflexible as he remembered. And he asked her to hear his request, speaking words in Latin that frightened the spirit. And suddenly a water barrier pushed Gray away from his group. The Great Spirit asked how he could know such words. This prayer was passed to the Emperor of Neuropasto, who saved the world, but this world had not yet been saved. Gray replied that great spirits had to do their job of granting blessings. What she did now was against the rules. Finally, she decided to pass on to him the secret of water, the source of energy. His life force would be as potent as spring water, and Gray felt the fatigue of his body disappear. When Gray emerged from the water prison, he told Fiona that he was fine. The spirit said she would keep an eye on Gray because he broke the rules and would be watching him. Finally, the whole group left the temple, and Gray asked Sasha if she didn't intend to join their group. She agreed. If they were good at accepting her, she would like to join. Ezekiel was happy because having a healer would be a great help. Fiona hugged her, all happy because they would have another member in the group. She said they could eat something somewhere and go shopping together. Gray said he would go out to check the city's fortifications, and Ezekiel said he would extend the invitation to hang out too. Fiona let them go because she could spend some time with Sasha. They walked away. Just then, Heinz appeared, and Gray asked how things were going. The materials arrived and were being prepared, but they still couldn't find enough craftsmen. The demons attacked to the north, and they should focus on that side. Heinz agrees to do as ordered. Ezekiel asks how Gray would know this, and he replies, "It was just intuition." The number of champions and mercenaries was piling up with the soldiers, but Gray thought experience was better than quantity. Many were novices there. Ezekiel ended up being in charge of their training. Heinz says that Gray was incredible. He was benevolent, calm, and always thought of others. The protagonist did not intend to become the Lord. He was just fine defending the city. Heinz intended to do his best to be an excellent leader. Although he wasn't entirely reliable, Gray thought he could become a good Lord. It was almost time for the tragedy, and he couldn't fail this time. In parallel, Georg had been trapped all this time. The door opened and Georg was ready to ask to be taken out of there, because who appeared was not Ezekiel this time, but Heinz. He apologizes as he took much longer than necessary to find out where he was. Georg wanted to eat, take a bath, and have a woman to satisfy him. But soon he received a brutal wound from Heinz. He couldn't even believe he was betrayed right after being freed. It was because Georg was no longer useful, so he would ensure he never spoke again. According to Gray's prediction, the demons would invade at dawn. The soldiers were worried because they were prepared in the middle of the night, because Gray had said before that the sun would rise in the middle of the night. Out of nowhere, they pointed to the horizon when a glow appeared. The sun was rising in the middle of the night as expected. Or rather, it wasn't a sun, but a giant summoning circle. A dragon emerged that was flying with a demon on top. He began to speak in an unknown language, and dozens of circles took over all the surroundings of the city. An immense number of monsters began to appear from the circles. There were dragons, skeletons, and all kinds of unimaginable demons. The soldiers announced their arrival desperately. Gray said it was time. All squads must repel attacks in formation as practiced. The champions would focus on the larger monsters, and everyone prepared. Brenda was there as the pride of the family and couldn't owe a debt to a peasant. Her group came to help. They could do their best to hide behind her. They were all ready. Now Gray was prepared to face the monsters. The demon heard that the defenses were weak and there were few soldiers. He ordered his soldiers to advance and wipe out the existence of humans. Thus the humans also began to launch attacks against them. They should remain prepared because even larger monsters were coming. Spells were fired and arrows too. They prepared to keep attacking with hot oil when they scaled the fortress. The monsters were left wondering what had happened because the information was wrong. They decided to destroy the walls and pass through. And Brenda was there to finish off all of them who thought they could destroy the city. Fiona accompanied her, as well as Ezekiel and Sasha came to heal the wounded soldiers. One of them ended up scaling the wall and was so large they barely had time to defend. Gray activated his evil eye at that moment. He fired a fire spell so powerful it sent him flying far away. It was going well thanks to the blessing of the Great Spirit. Gray didn't tire as much as before. It wasn't like the first time, but his eye wouldn't stop hurting. In the previous life, Red fell without resistance. In the end, Gray suspected there was a traitor in the city who made this happen. Reports came to Orlando and Heinz shortly after. They repelled the first attacks, but the wall ended up being destroyed. Orlando says they should go too, and Heinz reminds him that a lord shouldn't do that. He would expose himself to danger. But Orlando refuses to leave aside someone who saved their lives. He trusts Heinz to leave the city in his hands. Thus Orlando decides to lead his soldiers to defend the city. It was then that suddenly Orlando was attacked from behind unexpectedly. Heinz says that his father was painful, he wanted to kill him last, but insisted on stealing his fun. He asked what it felt like to die at the hands of his son. People were left not understanding what Heinz had done to their lord out of nowhere, but he replies that everyone was too slow and begins to cast a demonic spell. The circles take over the soldiers who are frightened. Although they call for help, all of them were caught off guard by monsters. This was how Heinz thought a true ruler should be. Our video ends here. If you liked it, leave your like. See you next time. Bye-bye.